they'll go to, Google how to get a woman back, how to make girls like you. Like that's like the common trope people like in middle school or high school, right? And so like or like they'll get cheated on or whatever, like something happens where they'll get like the red pill experience, right? And so they'll go online looking for answers and they'll find these channels that kind of speak to what they want. And the problem is, like I said, there's a lot of truth in what they say, but there's also a lot of falsehoods. And so the part of having wisdom is you listen to a lot of array of people because you want to get a lot of diverse opinions on stuff because you want to be well rounded. You don't want to just listen to an echo chamber. You want to like hear like feminist arguments, Christian arguments. Most you want to hear like everybody because maybe there's something they know you don't know, but you also have to know what's right and wrong, right? So you kind of just do it to listen to people.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Harry Man Talks. I'm your host, Harry Man, and we're on a roll, man. 2 episodes this week. I'll probably release this one next week. So it'll probably be, let's look at the calendar, dropping on August 4th. So this is a special one we have. This guest is anonymous for certain do you want to say why you're anonymous and kind of introduce yourself? You don't have to say your name.
Yeah. So basically, I'm, you know, just going to be saying some pretty base stuff. So I don't want to get doxxed or give any information out that could affect my employment or relationships.
No, I feel that. You got to make your money. So I kind of wanted to I have some topics written down. Um, you are a Christian, right?
That's right.
And what is is it the word denomination? Like what denomination are you?
Yeah. So, like, in a lot of religions, there's, sects or denominations or, different groups for it. But for Christianity, usually it falls under like denomination. You also have cults, but those are usually like the false like denominations. Like the main Christians reject the cults as like too radical and they interpret the scriptures wrong. But I would say, yeah, I'm kind of Baptist at the moment, but I would say that it's not something that like is super, super important. I kind of just follow the scriptures. And then there's some things that I agree with other denominations on. There's some things that I agree with Baptists on. But I really just follow the scriptures and, um, kind of just put two and two together and just follow what I read.
That's awesome. What made you like? How old are you again?
So I'm 27 right now.
27. What made you like go deep into faith? Because a lot of people in 20s, like they're not really into faith. Like,
Yeah. So I think it was 20, I think it was 2018 around Thanksgiving. I was having a phone conversation with my dad, and at this point, I was what people would call like a lukewarm Christian, where I wasn't actually a Christian, but I kind of went through the motions. So like I'd go to church on Sunday and I would pray every now and then, but like I didn't know what the Bible really said about stuff. I was kind of just like doing what my parents told me. And so I was on the phone with my dad and we were talking about stuff and one thing led to another. And he kind of basically like explained what Christianity really is to me. And it was like the first time I heard the gospel. And since that point, there was like a change that happened within me, which is what the Bible says happens. Um, and since then, I've had like kind of a different character. Looking back, it was like a paradigm shift, like the way I saw the world and everything. Because growing up, no one, my mom, my dad, me, and my brother, none of us were actually Christian. We were all kind of going through the motions. But I think it was in like 2017, my dad had retired and then he started kind of like looking around at like religion and stuff. And then he understood Christianity at that point. Like, he prayed on it and stuff. Then my mom understood it. And then through talking to him, since now he understood it, I could like see where he was coming from. And then it made sense to me. And then I started being like a real Christian. And then, so that was in 2018. I was like 20, I think I had just turned 23 at that point. So,
Like what in your character did you notice changed?
so I would say like, well, it all starts with like knowledge and belief. So if you believe like the burning, like if you believe the building I'm in right now is gonna burn down, my action is gonna reflect that belief. So I'm gonna like leave the building immediately, right? So if I believe what the gospel is saying is true, um, my actions and like attitudes are gonna change. So for instance, if I think that everyone has sinned and myself included because you read the Ten Commandments and everyone's lied. I mean, and everyone who says they hadn't lied is ironically lying, which means that I'm not perfect. And according to the gospel, if I'm not perfect, that means that I'm supposed to be judged for that because a good judge punishes all sinners. So I'm supposed to be judged for my sin, which means going to hell. And God provides a way out for me. And so if I believe that's true, I'm going to be more forgiving. I'm going to be more happy because now there's contrast. So every day when I wake up, I get an extra day to live and I'm not being punished. I get to live life and I get to go to heaven and be with the creator. So like your outlook changes on everything. It's like if you're a person and you've had everything handed to you your whole life, if a minor inconvenience happens, like, the longest line at the store, like you're gonna be really upset about it. But if you've been homeless your whole life or something, things like that don't really bother you because you have a good contrast. So basically, like I have a good contrast now, because I know where I should be, which is hell, and I'm not there. And on top of that, like I have more joy, because like I actually know God now and I feel his like, his presence. Um, there's like calmness because I feel like secure. Um, you know, I pursue truth more like in all areas of life because I realized with this one thing I was sold a lie growing up. And now it kind of makes you like wake up almost, which has led into like other realms of life where I've realized, okay, like I've been sold lies in other areas of life. Like what else, like what else is there actually like people aren't telling me? And so it kind of like started a force fire of like me looking for truth.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think faith is important for each and every person, and people without faith, like a lot of people say this, they don't have like a moral compass. They're just kind of doing their own whims and desires.
Yeah.
Um, and Christianity and Islam are like Muslims is a lot of similarities. And I was listening to this Christian speaker on this stream, and I think he was speaking with, I don't know if she was atheist or agnostic, but she was kind of justifying prostitution.
Oof.
And it was like, how do you determine what's that's
Right.
something like a lot of atheists say, like, okay, this is good, but this is bad. Like, who determines what's good and bad? Like, what would you say to that person?
Well, so this is like the like problem of like morality. So atheists have a subjective morality system where they'll say that the whole point of morals is to propagate the species through evolving and reproducing. And so they say that killing someone is morally wrong because it ends somebody's life. And so that's bad. And lying to people are bad because that could put the tribe at risk. It's like all these things that it makes sense on a surface level, but then you get down to the nitty gritty. It's like, okay, but who told you it's a good thing for us to survive? You're starting with a supposition that like we ought to survive, and nobody told you that. Like, so me killing somebody, like in an atheist worldview, if I kill somebody, then like that reduces like the population, but why is that a bad thing? It's not like they're created in the image of God, you know? But in like if you have an objective worldview, which is like any type of, deity, so like Islam, Christianity, Judaism, there's probably like some other ones. I don't know what other religions like their worldviews are, but if you have a creator or creators, then you can have objective morality because it comes from the creator and they establish the rules. It's almost like having a video game with like no campaign. You're just like in creator mode. It's like there's no morality or like rules. But if you're in a campaign mode, there's like objectives and stuff. And so if you have no objective morality, then you can say whatever you want. Like, abortion's okay. You can say that killing people is technically okay, pedophilia is okay. But if you have objective morality, then whatever the creator says is your moral compass, which kind of gives you a good foundation to live life on.
Yeah. What do you say to the people that are like the atheist, for example, or somebody who's agnostic? Like, I have two questions. The first one is start with the first one is like the people that say why does God let bad things happen if he does exist?
Yeah, that's the problem of evil. So so if it's an atheist asking that question, I would ask, well, how do you determine good people and bad people? Because it's sneaking a presupposition in there saying, like, well, I'm a good person when it's like you don't even believe in good and bad. Like, you just have, like, I think as Dawkins says, like, ignorant and indifferent bliss. Like, that's all it is. And so I would have to, like, challenge the idea of, like, okay, what's good and bad? Now, if it's like, a Christian or a Muslim asking the question, well, then their worldview would have the same issue. But if they're trying to like understand, like they're coming from within my framework, then the actual answer is, well, you know, as a Christian, nothing like we all deserve to go to hell because we sin. Like every single person on the planet deserves that. But by grace, we're not sent there immediately. We're given time on this earth to repent and seek God. And so Jesus says, like, I think it's in like Luke when there's like, I think like a tower falls on some Romans and everyone's crying to him. And he's saying, repent or you likewise will perish. And it's this idea where it's like, you got it all wrong. Like everyone deserves that. Not just like the Romans, like everyone deserves judgment. And so like anything less than judgment is grace. I mean, that's like the hard answer people don't like. Like if you deserve to go to hell and you're not going to hell, anything less than that is grace. And so like, instead of looking at like bad things that happen as bad, look at good things that happen as like grace and bad things that happen as like, what we deserve. You know what I mean? And it's also like the idea that like we do this to ourselves too. So it's like if someone murders somebody, it wasn't like God did that. It was like the other person. Like it's not like God's like purposely killing innocent people for no reason. Like that doesn't happen. So, it's complex and that's like the hardest question for any like any like deistic worldview. But it's basically like what's good and bad, what's your concept of good, how you define a good person, and the idea that no one's actually good. That's what Romans, I think, 3 says.
Yeah. I think it also goes into like God's wisdom. Like you don't know his wisdom. And there's a story in the Quran. I won't go into all of it, but I'll send you a link. Like it's the story of Prophet Moses and Al-Khidr. And Al-Khidr was a guy that just knew a little bit more than Prophet Moses. And Prophet Moses was saying, nobody knows more than me. And then God tells him, go to this guy, Al-Khidr. And he goes and they go on a boat and he follows Al-Khidr. And Al-Khidr, these guys let them on the boat and they go to the bottom of the boat. Al Khidr puts a hole in the boat, and the water starts coming up, and they get off and land on the land. And Moses says to Al Khidr, "Why did you put a hole in the boat? These nice guys let us on their boat." And he says to Moses that um, you do not know that these pirates were going to meet them at the sea, and they would have taken the ship if it was in good condition. But the fact that I put the hole in the boat, it saved them from the pirates.
Right. Yeah, so it's exactly that. It's like the idea that um like God can definitely know things you don't know. And I think there's God can also use bad things for good. So it's Genesis 50:20 talks about how I think the verse is like what they meant for evil, I meant for good. So it's like God using people's sinful actions for good. And God can also use, like in the story of Job, like punishments or like things like that, to kind of like teach you lessons and to strengthen your faith. I mean, it happened to Paul when he had a thorn in his side. So there's a lot of different like things for it. But it just kind of like depends where they're coming from.
Like, have you ever had a moment or a time in your life where you're, committing a sin, but that sin kind of led you to realize it was wrong and it led you towards the right path?
Well, as a Christian, you know, there's this idea that there's different levels of sins, and I kind of agree with that. Like I think killing someone is worse than having anger. There's different, but I mean, they're all reprehensible to God, and they all deserve judgment. But even in the Old Testament, people would get stoned for killing, whereas having anger in their heart, you can't really like punish that. And so like that kind of goes with me. So like depending on the level of the sin is like pretty much the level of like repentance I feel, because I feel convicted by the Holy Spirit. So if I'm like if I'm like lusting after a girl, that is like I'll feel convicted about that. Um but if I were to like engage in like any sexual activity with her, that would be like way worse. I'd feel that way more because it's like actually going through with the act to the logical conclusion. And so I think if I stop myself before it gets out of control, then it's not as bad. I still feel remorse. But yeah, like if I am sinning, especially like with anger or something like that, I don't really get anger too often, but if I do, it's like I immediately like see, and I see this in other people too. I'll see like sins that other people commit, and I'll see like it just gives me this like evil feeling in my soul where I look at it and I understand why that's a sin. And it even learning from other people, like seeing like a drunk man or something, I just kind of see that like I learn through others as well as looking at the consequences through myself as well as my own subjective feelings. And I think that all kind of like over time through a process called sanctification, it kind of slows down. And I don't believe you can ever stop sinning, but it reduces the frequency of me doing it and the level at which I do it. And it kind of steers me more back to God because if you're not sinning, you're pursuing God. I mean, there's no middle ground. So I think doing that, it steers me back.
Yeah, there's a saying in Islam. I don't know where it's from, but it's like heaven will be filled with sinners, but they were sinners that repented.
Yeah.
Um, Another question I had is like I met it was a guy who was Christian, but he was kind of saying he was agnostic. He wasn't sure, he's looked into Islam, he's looked into other religions, Buddhism, and his problem with this, I was trying to explain to him Islam, and his only problem with Islam and Christianity was the idea of predestination. So like some people in Islam, it is like, okay, some people are destined for hell. They might not be there forever. They might be there for a certain time, and then if they have some faith, they'll get out or somebody might save them. But is there an idea of predestination in Christianity?
Yeah, so there actually is. It's a verse in the Bible. I can't quite remember it right now. I think it's I want to say it's in Romans 8, but I can't remember exactly. It's the New Testament, but it clearly says God predestines. It's like I'm paraphrasing, but those words are used. And so you, as a Christian, if you believe the scriptures, you can't deny that it occurs. The contention that arises is on what grounds does God predestinate people? And what I believe in is nobody likes it, but I believe it to be true. So I'll tell you what the other side believes. Most Christians will tell you, if they're reading their Bibles, they'll tell you that God predestines people um, based on his quote unquote foreknowledge that they would choose Christ in their lifetime. So he predestines them for heaven. So it's like God looks down the corridors of time and sees that, Joe and John and Mary or whoever chooses Christ, but then other people don't. And so then he chooses to predestine them to go to heaven. And then the rest, he just lets them do what they want and then they go to hell. I don't think that's true because that gives me bragging rights. If I get to heaven, I can say that I was smarter or wiser. Or I'm just better. Like the limiting factor between me and people in hell is the fact that I'm superior. And there's even scripture that goes against that view. My view is the fact that God, quote unquote, looks down the corridors of time, sees that everybody rejects Christ, because that's what Romans 3 says. And so he has to pick people unconditionally, which means he basically like looks at the population and says, well, I can't pick them based on the idea that they're going to pick me because no one's picking me. I'm looking down the corridors of time and no one's seeking me. So I have to pick people like independently of what they choose because no one wants me. If I choose based on what they want, I'm picking no one. So he picks, a small amount of people that are chosen unconditionally, and then they get predestined to heaven, and then everyone else gets left in their sin, and then they all reject God in real life. So what happens is when I got saved 4 years ago, it wasn't like I was better than other people or smarter. I got chosen before the foundations of the world unconditionally, and that's why I got saved. It wasn't from anything I did. So when I go to heaven, when I die, if someone were to ask me, why are you in heaven and the people in hell weren't? I would say, well, God decided to give me grace and someone else, and I don't have an answer to why, but it wasn't like I earned it. There was nothing I did to earn it.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of the idea, but that's a 30-hour conversation about all that because it gets really in the weeds. But that's we do believe in predestination. There's like two or three different camps on it, but that's kind of like a cursory view of it.
Yeah. I kind of agree to an extent. Like, there's a concept of like free will in Islam, and it's the same in Christianity. I assume like
Yeah,
you it's like it's also the concept of like in Islam that your good deeds won't earn you heaven. It's God's mercy. But we still believe like you're held accountable for the things that you've done. So if
yes,
you've sinned your whole life and you've rejected the scripture and all this and the signs, then yeah, that's basically like disbelief. You're going to hell.
yeah,
But we believe that God gives us chances, and there's also a saying that it's not the eyes and the ears that are blind; it's the heart.
yeah,
So yeah, man. The one thing that just being blunt, is that Muslims and there's a lot of similarities between Islam and Christianity, monotheistic religions, even with Judaism, but the one thing that we disagree on, so I'm not here to debate. I just wanted to hear your side is the Trinity. So like, can you define the Trinity and then why you believe in it?
Yeah, so there's like topics in Christianity that are really hard to articulate. One of them is like free will. Another one is like the Trinity, and there's a few other ones. But basically, like the Trinity is this it's this biblical concept we get when if you read all the scriptures together, right? You can't just read one thing and say, oh, it says this. You have to read everything, and then you basically use logic from the scriptures. Like, okay, if it says this and it says this, it kind of gives you a picture of what God is. The Trinity is basically God is one being of essence. And so what essence is it's like the stuff that makes you up. It's like who you are. It's you could say like it's like for a human, it's like their soul. It's like that's your essence. Like if I were to point at like that dust, I would say that's like that's Alex or that's, Bill or whatever. But then the person, so God exists as one being, but three persons. So what that means is like there's the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. If I look at the Father, I see that God dust. Like this is just an analogy, but like if I look at the Father, I see like the essence of God in the Father. If I look at the Son, I see that same essence in the Son. If I look at the Holy Spirit, I see that same God essence in the Spirit. But the Father is not the Son is not the Father, and the Spirit is not the Father, but they're God. You see what I'm saying? So there's one being, because the Old Testament says it. It says, hear Israel, the Lord your God is one God. But then there's also this idea that God exists as three people. And the reason that's so confusing is that God is supposed to be complex. If he was so easy to understand, that would kind of lend its hand to being man-made in a sense. Like if we could understand him, that's intuitively like I think like with like the like having many gods like in a lot of pagan religions, like that seems so fake to me because it's like that seems like what a kid would come up with. But I don't think anyone would just come up with like the Trinity because it's so complex and humans like making things into images they can understand. So the idea of God being that complex kind of lends credit to it being, real. But anyway, so the reason the Trinity exists is, and this is kind of like, I think the argument's called the argument from love. So it's something like how when God created the universe in Genesis 1, he did so because God's always existed as a Trinity. The Son's never been without the Father, the Father's never been without the Spirit. They've all, God has existed as the three persons forever. When God made the universe, he made it out of love between the people in himself. So he made it he basically, and this is very complex and it's hard to explain, but it's like the Father, so the Father and then the Son and then the Spirit is like the love between them. And so when the Father, does things, it's like he's communicating his love to the Son within himself through the Spirit back and forth. And the Father does it to the Father. And then like we get the Spirit, and it's like the same kind of thing between us and the Father and the Son. And so, this is super confusing, but I'm paraphrasing here. So when God made the universe, he made it out of love for each person in the Trinity during creation. So it was like God already had love within himself. He didn't need creation to show that, which means that he's self-existing as love eternally. He makes out of that rather than making it to show his love. So he's self-existent with love.
Okay, got you. Yeah, I'm gonna have a guest on, Muslim guy. He was a former Christian, I think, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to explain his idea. I don't have much knowledge on like the Bible, so
Yeah.
would love to have you on again and go more in depth on that,
Yeah.
even if it's just you or other people. But I wanted to get into the dangers of dating.
Oh yeah.
The Islamic belief is that, from scholars and people of knowledge, is that it's forbidden. Like dating is it just leads to sin and destroys your soul. And the best thing to do is just to meet the girl's family, get to know her through the family. Obviously, you talk to her and, but, you don't spend too much time like being alone with her until you get that nikah, which is the marriage contract, and then
Yeah.
you can live alone with her and do what you have to do. Have intimacy and have children and the way life is supposed to be. But now we see this whole dating thing. Instagram is a dating app,
Yeah.
Tinder, Hinge. Yeah. So what is
Yeah.
yeah, Bumble? Like, what's your thoughts as a Christian man on dating?
So I like to think of myself as pretty idealistic. So in a perfect world, if, traditionalism was alive and well, I would agree that the way that you're saying to do it would be the best way. Because ideally, like dating is a very modern invention. There was no like real term for that in the Old Testament. In fact, I was just reading last night in or it was a few nights ago in First Samuel talks about like David seeing a woman and he's like, I'm gonna make her my wife. And then they got married, and then like the next day, it's like then they're like having like intimacy, and like that was fine because it's like you see a girl you like, she likes you, you get married the next day, and it's like you're good to go, like in front of God, like no, there's nothing wrong there, and you don't fall into like sexual temptation. Obviously, like waiting a day is like a little bit rushed in some circumstances, but like that was kind of what happened back in the day is like you would see a woman, you would get to know their family, and like it would happen very quickly because you would want to avoid sexual temptation, right? So in today's world, the problem is that instead of dating based on like the idea of marrying was different back in the day. Back in the day, it was usually like to propagate, the species, and like there was other reasons for it. But nowadays, it's like just based on like this Disney concept of love, like, oh, I got to find my person, my soulmate. So what ends up happening is instead of picking people and the whole soul myth idea, like you could have the whole soulmate idea. There's so many people you can get along with. It's not just one person. Like the odds of you finding that one person who happens to be in your city, like it's very convenient. Like why aren't they in Tokyo? You know what I mean? Like it's very convenient how your soulmate is in your neighborhood. But anyway, so the whole idea that we're supposed to like date until we find our soulmate, instead of dating on more important criteria like do they have the same beliefs as me? Are they traditional like me? Does their family, do they come from a good family? Do they want kids? What are their positions on like gender roles in the family? Are they traditional? Do they both want to work? What are their actual beliefs in our religion? So are they the same belief or sect or denomination as me? Um, things like that, like important things. Those are the most important things, and not like what's your favorite, like what kind of music do you listen to, or like what TV shows do you watch? Like those are all like that's like certain things like that are interesting. Like of course you want similarities with things, but in the grand scheme of things, like you should pick based on building a family, not based on your own selfish desires of love, if that makes sense. So I think like nowadays we got it all backwards. It should be quicker and it should be traditionally the woman is never like without a man's like guidance. Like the father raises the daughter and she lives with the family. And then the father in a kind of way interviews like the people who pursue her. Like you get to know the father and everything. And then like he eventually, like if he feels comfortable with you, like he'll hand his daughter off to you. And so then like the only man that she knows is she knows like her father, like in a familial sense, and then she knows you as her husband in an intimate sense. But that's all the contact she has with like men in like an intimate sense. She's not like going out on the weekends to clubs. She's not dating a bunch of guys, having sex with a bunch of guys, because then that just like ruins it all.
Yeah.
Um, and it protects like women from being like used and exploited because you have, she's got a good representation of a good father figure, and then she has you. So there was never a point in life where she was without like a good God-fearing man. So I think nowadays it's all backwards because you get on like Hinge and Tinder and stuff. It's just like, you're just pursuing like lusts. Like it's not really like a family building app. It's like, you know, you can use dating apps to like meet people because it's so hard to meet girls nowadays. Like it's a good avenue. It's like a networking app, but they can also be used for like hookups and fulfilling your lusts rather than like God's design, which is like to meet people, then to like get married and stuff and have kids.
Yeah. How do you avoid like the temptation? Because like it's said like in Islam, like the biggest test for man will be women lust.
Yep.
And then, now I'm making a video on this. It's like we have on our apps, there's like half naked women just pushed
Oh,
the
yeah. On
Instagram
Instagram.
culture. Outside, Western culture, women are,
Parading around.
yeah, like we're told to lower our gaze, but it's hard. Like as a man,
You have nowhere to look.
you're at the gym, you're just doing, shoulder presses.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah. And so I think the Bible also says like you can kind of guard yourself from every sin and fight every sin, but with lust you're supposed to flee because you can't fight it. Like it's like you can't, like lust is like just like a perversion of our biological desire to reproduce. And so like it's almost like eating and stuff. Like it's like hard to like, change that. And so in today's world, I guess like how to avoid it is like, don't be alone with like a woman. Unless she's like your wife or like family or something. But like, don't be alone with like a woman like you're pursuing, right? Um, I would say like don't like, you know, don't get on like Instagram, or if you get on Instagram, like make sure like you're not following any girls like that. Jesus kind of says like if your eye causes you to stumble, like pluck it out. And that's not actually meaning like gouge your eye out. It's just like the idea of Instagram's causing you to stumble, delete it. Like if you can't handle it. If you struggle with porn addiction, like there's like softwares you can do that can send all your search history to like someone else. So like get someone at like your church or mosque or wherever you're going to like send it to them, and like that'll you be like, I'm not gonna look at this. And so like it's a good buffer against that. And like so there's like precautionary things you can do to avoid it. But I think when it comes down to it, when it's shoved in your face 24/7, like you're at Starbucks waiting in line and a girl comes up wearing like booty shorts, it's like, you know, there's this common idea in Christianity where like if it's like a moment glance, if it's like less than a second, it's not bad. But if your gaze lingers, that's sin. So like if you act like if they just walks into like your view of sight, that's not sin because like that you didn't do that intentionally. But if you like crank your neck or like keep your gaze fixed, then you're sinning. Yeah. So like it's that idea where it's like don't like try to go like your whole life without like looking at stuff. Just don't let it linger, and replace that with other things. So like it is hard, but you have to be disciplined, and you have to just like not look, because like the ultimate logical consequence of me staring at women is I'm going to want to have sex. And when am I like, and like if I'm not married, like and it kind of like looks bad on the woman, because why would you want to pursue a woman who's like parading herself around? She's got nothing, she's got no virtue or femininity to offer. She just uses her body to get your gaze. Like it's the equivalent of a guy just flashing money on a yacht to like get you to want to like have sex with him. It's not like a godly man who like, you know what I mean? Like it's the equivalent. So
That kind of leads me into this whole manosphere online. You're seeing like Andrew Tate,
yeah,
and the red pill guys, Fresh and Fit.
yep,
Uh, Andrew Tate, he's gotten a bit better. I still think he could be a bit more humble and, not
Yeah,
so cocky and put so much emphasis on materialist like capitalism and money and but these like red pill guys, it's like I feel like they're really destroying they're dividing men and women, putting them against each other. And then they're giving men terrible advice like, oh, you have to have like 50 plus bodies. Uh,
yeah, yep. Don't get
like,
married. Straight up.
like, and these guys aren't even married. So, like, why would I
Yeah,
get advice from them? It's like, and it happens to a lot of guys because a lot of guys, they'll get heartbroken, they'll simp, and then they'll start watching these red pill videos and they'll become this.
yeah,
So what's your thoughts on this whole red pill movement and the Christian point of view?
yeah. So I think there's a quote that says like, in every like lie, there's a hint of truth to like get you like any believable lie. There's a hint of truth to get you to believe it, right? So like if I'm going to tell a lie, I'm going to give you like kind of like Satan does in the Bible, like he sprinkles like a little bit of truth in there, but then like it's a deception because then it's like if it's a flat out lie, you're not going to believe it. Like if the red pill said like beat up women, no one's going to like people like that's obviously wrong. But if they like give some context, like oh, like cheat on a girl because so and so, it's like well, I am a high value man. I can cheat on a girl. Like it's like a little bit of truth that like kind of gets you to believe it. Like oh, like high value, whatever you want to call it. But then like the actual actions are wrong. So it's like what happens is men like they'll be quote unquote blue pilled their whole life, which I think is you shouldn't be that. That's wrong too. All right. There's an actual answer to all this. So they'll go through life, ooh, like women are goddesses, you go girl, like all this like, blue pill stuff. And then they'll like, simp for these girls, which is wrong. I don't believe giving any woman attention unless she's your wife, or like you're like, pursuing her, right? Then you can like give her attention. But other than that, like you shouldn't be like liking like girls half naked photos on Instagram or giving them attention or sipping for them or having coffee dates with them. None of that, because that's like the female currency. I think they're right on that. Like women love attention. So why are you giving women attention for free when they're not yours? Like they're not your wife? And so that's the first thing. So men will do that wrongly. They'll get radicalized, like you said. They'll go to, Google how to get a woman back, how to make girls like you. Like that's like the common trope people like in middle school or high school, right? And so like or like they'll get cheated on or whatever. Like, something happens where they'll get like the red pill experience, right? And so they'll go on looking for answers and they'll find these channels that kind of speak to what they want. And the problem is, like I said, there's a lot of truth in what they say, but there's also a lot of falsehoods. And so the part of having wisdom is you listen to a lot of array of people because you want to get a lot of diverse opinions on stuff because you want to be well rounded. You don't want to just listen to an echo chamber. You want to like hear like feminist arguments, Christian arguments. Most you want to hear like everybody because maybe there's something they know you don't know, but you also have to know what's right and wrong, right? So you kind of just do it to listen to people. So people listen to these channels and they give a lot of good advice. Go to the gym, nothing wrong with that. Being masculine, being assertive, nothing wrong with these things. Telling women what you want and demanding it and breaking up with them if they don't give you that. That's true too. If you tell a woman, hey, this is what I want. You can't be doing these things. If she breaks it, like if she says I'm going to do it, then like leave her. Like she's for the, for the streets or whatever you want to call it. So there's a lot of truth in like what they say, but then it goes too far with like them saying, "Oh, you got to have 50 bodies before you get married because like you got to know how to work with women, right? Oh, like if you're high value enough, like you can cheat, like you can cheat on people, like or you can have like three girlfriends at like the same time, right? Like and like have sex with all of them. Like you can't be doing all that." And so like uh, and like another thing too is like they'll go too far with um like the cockiness and like flexing like and they'll like exploit women too. So like red pilling game is all about like exploiting women's like psychology. So it's like, oh, like if I do this or do that, then like it'll get her more aroused. And then if I do this, and then if I like leave her on red, that'll make her insecure. Then if I do this and so like I think there's good and bad with it. I think it's the red pill is more accurate than the blue pill. But I don't think it's the full picture. I think you can be like red pilled, but take all the good stuff and leave all the bad stuff out, which is what I do. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going out having sex with girls, but I have a lot of the same mindset where it's like I'm not going to take a girl seriously and keep pursuing her if she's going to the club. I'm just going to be like, hey, you can do that. It's wrong, but I'm not going to take responsibility for you and protect you and guide you if you're going to be doing that. Like I'm not going to put up with that. So I think that part's true.
Yeah, there's always good and bad you can take from
Yeah.
anyone. Um, the one thing I see from the red pill guys that they're like, oh, women have no value, like they offer nothing besides, intimacy and that should and like besides, cooking and cleaning and like I mean, yeah, their nature is to be nurturing and their gender role is to not provide and protect like us, but when you're saying like that, like women provide nothing, would you say that about your mother? Like
Mhm. Yeah. So when you say like provides nothing, like you got to remember like these everyone's made in the image of God, so they can provide something. I think like the whole argument is like, and I think it's kind of true that like women in the past who are more traditional, they brought more to the table. I wouldn't say that no one brings nothing to the table because everyone in some sense provides companionship.
Yeah.
But I would say that women nowadays don't provide as much in a traditional sense as women back in the day did. Like, our mothers and grandmothers, like, they would do a lot more for our fathers than modern women would do for us today. But I think on the flip side, men today don't bring as much to the table as men back in the day did. So if you're bringing a lot to the table, you're providing, you're doing all your masculine role. And this is something I think Fresh and Fit gets right is like if I'm doing all that, I'm not going to want to date a girl who's not doing what she's supposed to be doing, right? So like I'm not going to do all this, protect her, take responsibility for her if she's not like listening to kind of what I'm saying and she's going out and going on like the clubs on the weekend, right? That's providing less value. It's like to me in like a traditional family building sense. So I would say, yeah, women don't provide as much as they used to as far as like traditional family nurturing roles, but men don't either. So it's kind of like, focus on yourself, do what you got to do to be right. And then if you find a girl who's got enough going for her, you can kind of like coach her along and kind of direct her along to be the kind of woman you want.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of your role is like a lot of women don't have good fathers nowadays. So if you find a girl you like who doesn't have the best father figure, you can kind of like instruct them along and kind of guide them. And if they trust you, they'll kind of listen and stuff. And so, that's kind of an roundabout way of answering it.
what like a lot of men like my age and some older, like in their 30s, they're pushing off marriage. They're like, you know what, I don't want to get married yet. I want to
Yep.
be settled financially, which is
Playboy lifestyle.
what'd you say?
Kind of like the Playboy lifestyle or like MGTOW.
Oh yeah, I mean some of them they like the Playboy stuff, like they like sleeping around and some are just like, they just don't want to commit to something like that
Yep.
or making excuses.
Yep.
But I think like marriage is honestly like aside from, doing your due diligence to God, which I think marriage is a part of that, it's success, like getting married, raising a family of righteous people. Like that's
Yep.
success. And if you're just pushing it off because oh, I don't have enough money, which God says in the Quran, he'll well, I don't want to quote if it's in the Quran, but in Islam, God says he'll provide for the married people, for the married man.
Yep.
So you have to have that faith and it is harder now to get married young, because a lot of families are, materialistic. They're looking at the guy's salary, what
Yep.
kind of job he has, and they're not really looking at the character. And like you
Yep.
said, a lot of men are their characters flawed, like they're weak. They're indulging in, hedonistic activities,
Yep. Yep.
addicted to porn, drugs, alcohol, and
Yep.
they get into these marriages and they don't last because
They don't lead.
the man doesn't have his stuff together.
Yep.
He doesn't have his relationship with God right. And they say like in Islam, if you want your affairs in life to be good, make your affairs right with God first and everything will fall into place. I
Yep.
mean, you have to put in the work. You still have to, there's a saying like tie your camel and then trust God. Um, so like what would you say to those guys that are like, I don't want to get married yet. I kind of want to mess around and I'll maybe when I'm 30, 35, like
Yeah. So I think like the first thing is like, so I'll make a counterpoint to what you're saying first, and then I'll kind of back up what you're saying. So the first counterpoint is I actually think that marriage is just a part of life, but a lot of people think it's like the main focus, like to get married. I'm not saying that's what you said, but I know a lot of people in Christian circles will be like, oh, I got to get married. I got to find like my person or whatever. And Paul says that it's better to not be married than to be married. He actually says, like, but if you do get married, it's not sin. So certain people are called to not be married. And that's based on like, if you feel called to that, that's usually based on, like, do you not have a sex drive? Do you have more, you don't have time for a wife? Like, there's certain people, like, in the Bible who just, like Paul didn't have time for a wife. He was so busy with, like, building God's kingdom and stuff. He didn't have time for that. Some other people did in the Bible, like Peter had a wife. And so they were both equally following God, just in different ways. So the default isn't marriage. The default is actually single. If you feel called to marriage, you should do that. And I think most people are called to marriage. And so there's nothing wrong with that. If you feel called to that, you should get married, and that's a good thing to God. But if you don't get married, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're abstaining. So if you're like, not having sex with women, not pursuing women, not entertaining it. You're just focused on like yourself, and you're focused on God, and you're focused on helping people and like, building up God's kingdom. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Because like marriage is like a commitment and stuff. Not everyone's called to that. But if you're abstaining from marriage because you want to sleep around and you don't want to be like locked down, that's wrong, obviously, because you like if you're not getting married, you shouldn't be having sex. But if you are having sex, you should be married. So the reality is most guys aren't doing it for the right reason. They're doing it because they want to live the Playboy lifestyle, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that most people don't think about that, like the joys that come with having kids and like raising a family. Like you're going to be like, what, 70? And this is why like you have to be called to singleness, because like there's a certain type of person who can do it, who can be 70 and not have any kids and be content. But most people have this desire to make, children and to have a family and to like, have people to take care of them when they're older. There's something comforting about like having Thanksgivings or whatever, or religious festivals, and having like everyone come over and like all the women like, talking and getting along, and all the men talking and getting along, and everyone's just like, there's something like innately human about that experience. And people don't ever think that far ahead, because the biggest thing is people haven't experienced that in the West because that's fallen apart. So people don't know what that's like. If you introduce people to like third world countries or something where they get it right and have big families, they would probably be like, well, I want to have that. But it's like this idea where we're told that's wrong. Focus on yourself. Girls are told, focus on yourself, queen. And Red Pill tells guys, get 50 bodies. Like it's just like feminism for men, right? And it's just like Satan's way of like making you single, so like you just keep like having sex with people and not making children. And that is the collapse of society by not having a family unit, right? You're supposed to have a family unit because that is one of the barriers to unrighteousness in society, is like you have a good stable family unit. So when the kids are going to school getting brainwashed and they come home, uh, like you can kind of like guide them away from like the world. It's like a protective barrier. And so if you're not doing that, you're if you're not called to singleness, you're disobeying God, because you're supposed to get married and have kids if you're able to. And so I would say like, you know, deep down, most guys want to have like sex and stuff. It's very few people who are like Paul. So I think you should, I think there's a time and place for it. So like if you're doing like anything in life, you need to there's a time and place for it. Like if you're in university and like you don't have time for that and you're not having sex with girls, you can put it off for a few years. Wait till you're 24, 25, 26. The cool thing about being a dude is, as long as you're abstaining and like you're not like falling into like sin regularly, you can put off marriage until you're older. Whereas with women, it's a little bit different because they can only have kids from a certain window. So if you're a dude, you can wait until you're 28 if you need to get everything right and then get a girl who's like 23 or 22 or something. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think like waiting until like you're super old just for the sake of selfish desires is definitely wrong. So I think there is some strategy to it, but I think most people are doing the wrong strategy.
Yeah. No, that's great. I didn't have any other topics, but did you have like something you wanted to talk about? For like 10 minutes.
Yeah, let me think here. Do you think dating has gotten harder nowadays?
Has it gotten harder? Um, I don't know because I'm not really in the dating scene, but what I see is that it's it, it's not really a dating culture. It's more like a hookup culture, and both guys and girls, they both have rosters, you know? And the problem I see with like some friends of mine that are in dating, family members, is they the breakups happen because a problem arises in the relationship, whether it's a year or a few months in, it's a fight or the other person, cheated or something. Cheating is big, but something small might even trigger a fight and they break up. Uh, Whereas in a marriage, if a fight happens, you resolve it, you figure it out. But the problem with dating is like people that go from dating to marriage is they take the same psychology.
Yeah.
So they're basically when a problem arises in the marriage, their innate feeling is okay. I need to get out of this. I need to leave. So a divorce, without resolving the issue.
Mhm.
And in every marriage, no marriage is perfect. There's gonna be issues that arise, big, small. So you're
Yeah.
gonna have to, have emotional intelligence and I can kind of see why some red pill guys have this. I feel like it's from selfish desire when they say like 50 bodies, gives me
Yep.
experience. But I can see why they're justifying it because, you have that many interactions with women, you kind of know how they work, but you don't have to have sex 50 times with 50 women
Yeah,
to
exactly.
know their psychology. You just have to be a person that is social and, is listens to people and
Yeah.
I know a lot of young Muslim men who waited till marriage to have sex and their marriages are great and they have kids they're like 10, 20 years into the marriage and you know
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think about like the economy and like the future of like jobs and like families and stuff? Like, do you think like it's going to be hard to get a job in the future? And do you think it's like what are your general thoughts on like education system, finding a job, like financial security in the future for most people?
I think it's getting way harder. Like it's going to be way hard. The prices are rising. Everything's going to be more expensive. The rich are getting richer. The poor are getting poorer. So
Yeah.
you have to figure out a way to be in that rich category, but also, help the poor and help people out. Don't be selfish, but you have to have a skill set. So you can't rely on it's good to have a job. It's good to have the sustained income for your family.
Yep.
Build a skill set where you can, have a business and scale it and have employees. And you can build a legacy because it's gonna be hard for your kids, and well, you said the education system, like I don't if you're going for medical school, that's one thing. If you're going to law school, that's one thing. But I went to school for business and bachelor's, I didn't learn anything about business. I honestly could have learned more having my own business. And Thankfully I had financial aid, but
Yeah,
so I wasn't
I
in debt.
need to too, and stuff.
Yeah, bro, yeah, you don't want to be in debt after college.
Yeah.
You'll just be stuck, and then
Yep.
so I would just say don't be in debt and have a skill set, make, you know, try to make money, and it's gonna be hard, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like it's supply and demand. So like if everyone's going to get a university degree and it's like through the roof, it's kind of like we talked about like with men and women, like how they each provide less value than they did back in the day as far as like their gender roles. University provides less today than it used to, and it costs more. So it's like unless you're going for something that needs a university degree, so like say you're like daddy's money kid and to work at the big firm you need to go to get a business degree, well then like you kind of have to, but it's just a rite of passage. Or like medical school or law school or engineer, any type of like actually career job, do it because you need it, right? And that's good money. But if you're just going because society tells you to, or like find yourself, or to have the college experience, and I kind of think like I heard I think Jordan Peterson said this, and I think a lot of stuff he says is wrong, but he made a good point that college is like Pleasure Island in Pinocchio. You ever seen that movie? You go there and it's like people are hooking up and everything's like paid for, and you're like it's just like you just indulging basically just to get in a bunch of debt and be a slave the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And so it's like, don't go to college, don't go to Pleasure Island unless you're going to get a degree to move on and get something. Everyone just goes because that's what society tells them to do. It's like the default. And that's like, you don't do that. Go get a trade job, study business like online. You can watch YouTube on like times 1.5 speed, like every day for 3 hours and learn more than you could in a week in a college classroom. And it doesn't cost you a dime. And you can be working a job and lifting weights and being active in your faith while doing that versus being just like completely time consumed at college and getting in debt. So, I mean, it's like, when people say it's a scam, I don't think college is a scam. I think people just, because a scam never works, but college does work if you go into the right fields. The problem is like people are making like the worst move possible by going to college, not even knowing what they want to do, just because society tells them you got to go have the college experience, go to college. Like that's like they're going for like the sake of going, not for the actual. They're not thinking logically like through what the final destination is.
Yeah. And I think that's fine for like people in their 18, 19, like that's the time to kind of like try, even in your 20s, like try stuff.
Yeah,
So it's good to, you know, experiment and see what you like, see what you're good at. But find what you're good at and then just go all in on that.
yeah, and it's got to pay well too. A lot of people will do what they want to do, and it's the whole idea of no one's going to pay you for a job they'd want to do. So if I like if I love playing video games, I'm like not going to pay someone to do it. Now there's an exception, obviously the top 1% of people who are Twitch streamers, but they're also entertainers. But it's like no one's going to pay some average Joe 100 grand to play some like Call of Duty game. So like you can't just do what you want to do. You have to think, how can I benefit society and other people? Like think about that. Like how can I be useful? What's something I like that can make me useful that society needs? And then go into that. People start with like their own selfish desire. What do I like to do? Without even thinking through, is this going to pay me enough? And can I actually contribute to society where I'm actually helping society? People just think, I just want to like be happy. It's like, how can it be useful to people? You know?
Yeah, it's like someone told me that you're gonna get paid you'll get paid more based on how many problems you can solve.
Yes, yes.
Yep.
So
Us too.
there's always new softwares coming out. There's always
Mhm.
it's gonna be it's getting easier to do things with like stuff like AI, but AI is also gonna bring in jobs that are needed by humans. So
Yeah.
you're gonna have to stay on top of trends, you know, business practices, softwares. So it's gonna be a lot more to learn. And it's kind of crazy because like you see, I'm gonna be honest, like the kids nowadays are way smarter than we were, and
Yeah.
a lot of people will disagree, but like uh, I guess from a technological side, they're way smarter.
Yeah, they are. And it's much more competitive now because we have access to information. Back in the day, like you couldn't teach yourself how to do Python and stuff. Now I can just go on YouTube and if I don't even have to go to school to learn how to code. I can learn in a summer in a boot camp or like on YouTube.
Yeah.
Um, or like AI can teach you. So there's like all these ways for the average Joe to be more competitive. It's bumping the average Joe up from being a 5 out of 10 competitive to like an 8. So it's like you gotta like kind of be ahead of the competition and like kind of be proactive with everything. And YouTube is such a gift that people don't realize. I watch YouTube so much every day, just learning stuff. Like you can watch like religious debates, you can watch like sermons, lectures on things, podcasts. Like there's so much productivity with YouTube. It's basically like a classroom.
Yeah.
People don't view it as that. They view it as like a distraction or like entertainment. So
I mean, it can be like I find myself. It just depends what you watch. Like,
yeah,
sometimes I'll watch mindless content for entertainment,
yeah,
like pranksters or like sports stuff, and there's no value in it.
I mean,
yeah,
With sports, sometimes I watch it and like I can see like certain moves these guys are doing, which I can implement.
yeah,
But really, like it's not gonna make me more money or increase my knowledge.
yeah,
But yeah, there's a lot like that. That's honestly how when I came back to Islam, like 2 3 years ago, 2 years ago, like the Christian Muslim debates, or Muslim atheist debates,
yeah.
that was like where I got a lot of my knowledge.
Same. Yeah.
And yeah, man, I really enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully we can have it in the future. Talk about Christianity, uh, red pill.
Trinity, job market. I mean, there's so much to talk about. So,
Yeah, the job that's very interesting. That could be a whole like hour podcast about uh finding a job.
yeah, finding a job, finding a spouse, like there's so much, there's so much going on in today's world. So,
Yeah, and everybody's life is like everybody has their own journey. Like a
yeah,
lot of people, like especially in my culture, they're putting pressure on kids. Like your life has to go this way. You know,
yeah,
in this timeline. But it's like,
should go God's way.
yeah, it's God's timing is perfect.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, man, thanks for being on, and hopefully the viewers enjoyed. Anonymous guest. I'm gonna send this to my friend Juan, and hopefully Juan, if you're listening, I'll tell you who it is. I can put that in.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I appreciate it.
Yep. All right. I'll see you, man.